In the heart of New York City, a chance encounter in the snow pulls investment banker Jonathan Blackwell into an unexpected journey when he discovers a tiny, shivering puppy in Central Park. Faced with a choice, will he embrace the fragile life that could turn his world upside down, or walk away from the connection he never knew he needed? In the heart of New York City, where towering skyscrapers cast long shadows over bustling streets, lived Jonathan Blackwell, a 38-year-old investment banker known for his razor-sharp mind and unwavering focus on his career. Jonathan's life was a meticulously crafted routine, each day planned to the minute, leaving no room for unexpected interruptions or emotional entanglements. He prided himself on his logical approach to life, viewing pets as unnecessary complications that only served to disrupt one's carefully constructed world. On a crisp December morning in 2023, Jonathan decided to take a rare break from his usual routine. Armed with his high-end camera, he set out to capture the serene beauty of Central Park blanketed in fresh snow. The air was bitterly cold, his breath forming small clouds as he walked. But the park was a winter wonderland, untouched and pristine in the early morning light. As Jonathan framed a shot of a snow-laden branch against the pale winter sky, an unusual sound caught his attention. At first he dismissed it as the wind, unwilling to let anything distract him from his purpose. But as he moved deeper into the park, the sound became more distinct, a faint, pitiful whimper that seemed to tug at something long dormant within him. Irritated by the disruption, Jonathan tried to ignore the sound and focus on his photography. Yet with each step, the whimpering grew more insistent, as if calling out to him specifically. Finally, unable to concentrate on his shots, Jonathan decided to investigate, if only to silence the annoying noise. Following the sound, he veered off the main path, his expensive leather shoes sinking into the untrodden snow. As he pushed aside a cluster of snow-laden branches, Jonathan's eyes fell upon a sight that stopped him in his tracks. There, huddled beneath a bush, was a tiny puppy, its golden fur matted with ice and snow. The puppy was so small it could have fit in Jonathan's hand, its body trembling violently from the cold. Its eyes, barely open, looked up at Jonathan with a mixture of fear and desperate hope. For a moment, Jonathan stood frozen, unsure of what to do. His first instinct was to walk away. This wasn't his problem after all. He had no experience with animals and certainly no desire to start now. But as he turned to leave, the puppy let out another weak whimper, a sound so full of desperation that it seemed to pierce through Jonathan's carefully constructed walls. Before he knew what he was doing, he found himself kneeling in the snow, gently scooping up the tiny creature. The puppy's body was ice-cold against his skin, its heartbeat a faint flutter. Jonathan quickly unzipped his jacket and tucked the puppy inside, close to his chest. The logical part of his brain screamed at him to stop, to take the puppy to a shelter or a vet and be done with it. But something stronger, a feeling he couldn't quite name, compelled him to protect this fragile life. As Jonathan hurried home, the puppy nestled against him. He found himself talking softly to it, words of reassurance he never thought he'd utter. "Hang in there, little one," he murmured, surprised by the gentleness in his own voice. "We're almost there." Back in his sleek, minimalist apartment, Jonathan felt completely out of his depth. The space, designed for efficiency and style, suddenly seemed woefully unprepared for a tiny, vulnerable creature. Improvising, he grabbed a soft towel from his linen closet and gently began to dry the puppy, rubbing warmth back into its tiny body. As he worked, Jonathan's mind raced. What did puppies eat? How often did they need to be fed? Should he take it to a vet? He had never felt so unprepared in his life. Frustration welled up inside him. This was exactly why he avoided complications like pets. They disrupted everything, forced you to think about something other than yourself and your goals. Are you enjoying our story? Please leave a comment, like, and subscribe. We really value your feedback. Yet, as the puppy began to stir, its eyes blinking open to look at Jonathan, he felt something shift inside him. The tiny creature's gaze held no judgment, no expectations, only trust and a desperate need for care. For the first time in years, Jonathan felt needed for something other than his financial expertise. Pushing aside his doubts, Jonathan focused on the immediate needs of the puppy. He warmed some milk in the microwave, remembering vaguely that puppies couldn't digest regular cow's milk well, but unsure what else to do. Using a teaspoon, he carefully fed the puppy, watching in fascination as its tiny pink tongue lapped up the warm liquid. As the day wore on, Jonathan found himself canceling meetings and pushing back deadlines, something he had never done before. He spent hours researching puppy care on his laptop, ordering supplies online for rush delivery, and even calling a 24-hour veterinary helpline for advice. The puppy, which Jonathan had started calling Goldie in his head, though he refused to admit he had named it, slowly began to show signs of improvement. Its shivering subsided, and it even managed to stand on wobbly legs, exploring the towel-lined box Jonathan had prepared for it. That night, as Jonathan prepared for bed, he heard a soft whimpering coming from Goldie's makeshift bed. Without thinking, he scooped up the puppy and placed it on his king-sized bed. Goldie immediately snuggled close, its tiny body radiating warmth against Jonathan's side. For the first time in years, Jonathan fell asleep with something other than work on his mind. The next few days were a whirlwind of new experiences for Jonathan. He found himself rushing home during lunch breaks to check on Goldie, and staying up late to ensure the puppy was comfortable. His meticulously organized schedule was thrown into disarray, yet strangely, he found he didn't mind as much as he thought he would. Jonathan's colleagues were shocked to see him show up to work with dog hair on his impeccable suits. His phone, once filled with nothing but work-related apps, now had photos of Goldie's progress. Even his conversation topics began to shift, much to the amusement of his co-workers. As Goldie grew stronger, Jonathan found himself facing a dilemma. He knew he should start looking for a permanent home for the puppy. His lifestyle wasn't suited for a pet, and he had never wanted one. Yet, each time he thought about giving Goldie away, he felt an unfamiliar ache in his chest. One evening, about 2 weeks after finding Goldie, Jonathan sat on his couch, attempting to work on a crucial presentation. Goldie, now much livelier, was playing with a chew toy at his feet. As Jonathan glanced down, Goldie looked up at him, tail wagging, and let out a small, happy bark. In that moment, something inside Jonathan broke open. All the emotions he had been holding back, the fear of attachment, the worry about disrupting his life, the unexpected joy of caring for another being, came flooding out. To his shock, he felt tears welling up in his eyes. Picking up Goldie, Jonathan held the puppy close, feeling its heartbeat against his chest. "What have you done to me, huh?" he whispered, his voice thick with emotion. Goldie responded by licking his chin, a gesture so full of unconditional love that Jonathan felt his remaining defenses crumble. In the days that followed, Jonathan's apartment underwent a transformation. Chew toys and puppy beds appeared in every room. Baby gates were installed to create safe spaces. His pristine white couch was now covered with a protective throw, littered with dog hair but somehow more inviting than ever before. Jonathan's routine, once rigid and unyielding, became flexible. He started taking longer lunch breaks, using the time to walk Goldie in the park where he'd found her. These walks became the highlight of his day, a time when he could forget about work stress and simply enjoy the simple pleasure of a man and his dog exploring the world together. As weeks turned into months, Jonathan noticed other changes in himself. He smiled more, laughed easier. He found himself striking up conversations with other dog owners in the park, forming connections he would have previously avoided. His work, far from suffering, seemed to benefit from his newfound balance. His presentations were more engaging, his analyses more insightful, as if caring for Goldie had awakened a part of him long dormant. One Saturday morning, as Jonathan sat in his favorite coffee shop with Goldie curled up at his feet, he overheard a conversation that made him pause. A young couple at the next table was discussing their desire to adopt a dog, but their worries about the responsibility and changes it would bring to their lives. Without thinking, Jonathan turned to them. "Excuse me," he said, surprising himself with his forwardness. "I couldn't help overhearing. I was in your position not too long ago." He gestured to Goldie, who perked up at the attention. "I never thought I'd be a dog person, but this little one changed everything." As Jonathan shared his story with the couple, he realized how far he had come. The man who had once viewed pets as unnecessary complications was now passionately advocating for the joys of dog ownership. He spoke of the challenges, yes, but also of the indescribable bond that had formed between him and Goldie, the way she had opened his heart and changed his perspective on what truly mattered in life. The couple listened intently, their eyes moving between Jonathan and Goldie, who was now happily accepting pets from them. As Jonathan finished his story, the woman smiled, tears in her eyes. "Thank you," she said softly. "I think you've just helped us make our decision." Jonathan watched the couple leave hand in hand and with a newfound determination in their steps, and he felt a sense of fulfillment he had never experienced in all his years of financial success. He looked down at Goldie, who gazed back at him with unwavering trust and affection. "Come on, girl," he said, gathering his things. "Let's go home." As they walked out into the crisp morning air, Jonathan reflected on the unexpected journey that had brought him to this point. He had always believed that success was measured in financial terms, in the power and prestige of his career. But Goldie had shown him a different kind of success, one measured in moments of joy, in personal growth, and in the ability to open one's heart to love and be loved in return. The busy New York street stretched out before them, but Jonathan was in no hurry. He had learned the value of slowing down, of appreciating the small moments. As Goldie trotted happily beside him, her golden fur gleaming in the sunlight, Jonathan felt a profound sense of gratitude. He had set out that snowy morning months ago to capture the beauty of the world through his camera lens. Instead, he had found something far more precious, a companion who had taught him to see the world, and himself, in a whole new light. As the weeks turned into months, Jonathan's life continued to evolve in ways he never could have imagined. Goldie grew from a tiny, vulnerable puppy into a vibrant, energetic young dog, her golden fur shimmering in the sunlight, as they took their daily walks through Central Park. With each passing day, the bond between man and dog deepened, challenging Jonathan's long-held beliefs about companionship and purpose. One crisp autumn morning, as Jonathan prepared for an important board meeting, he noticed Goldie seemed unusually lethargic. Her usual enthusiasm for their morning routine was absent, and she barely touched her breakfast. Concern gnawed at Jonathan's stomach as he reluctantly left for work, promising Goldie he'd return as soon as possible. Throughout the meeting, Jonathan found himself distracted, his thoughts constantly drifting back to Goldie. For the first time in his career, he struggled to focus on the financial projections and strategic plans being discussed. When his phone buzzed with a message from his dog walker expressing concern about Goldie's condition, Jonathan made an unprecedented decision. He excused himself from the meeting, citing a family emergency, and rushed home. The sight that greeted him upon his return sent a chill through his body. Goldie lay curled up in her bed, her breathing labored and her eyes dull. Without hesitation, Jonathan scooped her up and raced to the nearest veterinary clinic, his heart pounding with fear. The next few hours were a blur of tests, consultations, and anxious waiting. The diagnosis, when it finally came, was grim. Goldie had contracted a severe case of canine parvovirus, a potentially fatal illness that often affected young dogs. The veterinarian explained that the next 48 hours would be critical, and that Goldie would need to remain under intensive care. As Jonathan sat in the sterile waiting room, his designer suit rumpled and his hair disheveled, he was struck by the realization of how much Goldie had come to mean to him. The thought of losing her was unbearable. For the first time in years, Jonathan found himself praying, pleading with any higher power that might be listening to spare his beloved companion. The next 2 days were the longest of Jonathan's life. He canceled all his appointments and meetings, much to the shock of his colleagues and clients. His phone rang incessantly with concerned calls from his boss and business partners, but Jonathan couldn't bring himself to care about work. His entire world had narrowed to the small white-tiled room where Goldie fought for her life. During his vigil, Jonathan struck up conversations with other pet owners in the waiting room, sharing stories and offering comfort to one another. He listened as an elderly woman spoke lovingly of her cat of 18 years, now battling kidney failure. He watched as a young couple anxiously awaited news of their rescue dog's surgery. In these moments of shared vulnerability, Jonathan felt a sense of connection he had never experienced in his high-powered business world. On the third day, the veterinarian emerged with a cautious smile. Goldie had turned a corner and was showing signs of improvement. The relief that flooded through Jonathan was overwhelming. As he was allowed to visit Goldie, seeing her wag her tail weakly at his approach, Jonathan felt tears streaming down his face. He realized that in nearly losing Goldie, he had found a part of himself he never knew existed, a capacity for love and empathy that transcended his carefully constructed world of numbers and deals. As Goldie recovered, Jonathan's perspective on life underwent a profound shift. He began to reevaluate his priorities, questioning the relentless pursuit of success that had defined his existence for so long. The long hours at the office and the constant stress of climbing the corporate ladder suddenly seemed hollow in comparison to the joy he felt when greeted by Goldie's wagging tail. Inspired by his experience at the veterinary clinic, Jonathan started volunteering at a local animal shelter on weekends. He found unexpected fulfillment in walking dogs that had been abandoned or abused, offering them the kindness and attention they so desperately craved. His coworkers were baffled by this new side of Jonathan, the man who once scoffed at the idea of charity work, now passionately advocating for animal welfare. One Saturday afternoon, as Jonathan was helping at an adoption event in the park, he encountered a familiar face. The young couple he had spoken to in the coffee shop months ago approached him, a bouncy Labrador puppy in tow. They shared how Jonathan's story had inspired them to adopt, and how their lives had been enriched beyond measure by their new furry family member. As Jonathan watched the couple interact with their dog, he felt a warmth spread through his chest, a sense of having made a real difference in the world. This encounter sparked an idea in Jonathan's mind. He began to envision a way to combine his business acumen with his newfound passion for animal welfare. Over the next few months, he poured his free time into researching and developing a plan for a nonprofit organization that would partner with corporations to sponsor animal shelters and promote pet adoption. Jonathan's colleagues were skeptical when he first presented his idea, but his passion was infectious. He spoke of the transformative power of the human-animal bond, backing up his emotional appeal with solid financial projections and marketing strategies. Slowly but surely, he began to win support for his vision. As his project gained momentum, Jonathan found himself at a crossroads in his career. The demands of his high-powered banking job were increasingly at odds with his new priorities. After much soul-searching and long conversations with Goldie on their evening walks, Jonathan made a decision that would have been unthinkable a year ago. He decided to leave his lucrative position to focus full-time on his nonprofit venture. The day Jonathan cleared out his office, his co-workers gathered to bid him farewell. Many were still puzzled by his choice, unable to comprehend why he would walk away from such a successful career. But as Jonathan stood before them, Goldie faithfully by his side, he felt a sense of peace and purpose he had never known in all his years of chasing financial success. In the months that followed, Jonathan threw himself into building his organization from the ground up. There were challenges and setbacks, moments of doubt when he questioned his decision. But every time he visited a shelter and saw the hope in the eyes of the animals there, every time he witnessed a successful adoption, he knew he had made the right choice. One year after leaving his banking career, Jonathan stood on a stage at a major animal welfare conference, Goldie sitting proudly at his feet. When he shared his journey from a pet-averse workaholic to a passionate animal advocate, he could see the impact of his words on the audience. People were moved to tears, inspired to action by his story of personal transformation and his vision for a world where every animal had a loving home. As Jonathan concluded his speech, he knelt down to ruffle Goldie's fur, overwhelmed by the journey they had taken together. From that fateful snowy morning in Central Park to this moment of triumph, Goldie had been more than just a pet. She had been a catalyst for change, a teacher of life's most important lessons. The applause that filled the auditorium was thunderous. But for Jonathan, the greatest reward was the knowledge that he had found his true calling. He had discovered that success could be measured not just in dollars and cents, but in wagging tails, purring cats, and the countless lives both human and animal, that he had touched along the way. While leaving the stage, Jonathan and Goldie were approached by a journalist eager to interview them for a feature story. The reporter asked Jonathan if he ever regretted his decision to leave his high-powered career behind. Jonathan smiled, looking down at Goldie, who gazed back at him with unwavering trust and affection. "Regret?" Jonathan replied, his voice filled with emotion. "How can I regret the decision that led me to the most fulfilling chapter of my life? Goldie didn't just change my life. She gave me a new one, a better one. She taught me that true wealth isn't found in a bank account but in the connections we make and the positive impact we have on the world around us." As they walked out of the conference center into the bustling city street, Jonathan felt a profound sense of gratitude wash over him. The path ahead was uncertain, filled with new challenges and opportunities, but he was no longer afraid of the unknown. With Goldie by his side, he was ready to face whatever life had in store, knowing that he had found something far more valuable than any financial success. He had found his purpose. The sun was setting over the city skyline as Jonathan and Goldie made their way home, casting a golden glow over the streets. As they walked, Jonathan reflected on the incredible journey that had brought him to this point. From a man who once viewed pets as an unnecessary complication to a passionate advocate for animal welfare, his transformation was nothing short of remarkable. He thought about the countless lives they had touched, the shelters they had helped, the animals they had saved, and the people whose lives had been enriched by the love of a pet. Each step forward was a step towards a better world, a world where the bond between humans and animals was celebrated and nurtured. As they rounded the corner to their apartment building, Jonathan paused, kneeling down to look Goldie in the eyes. In her gentle gaze, he saw reflected all the love, trust, and joy she had brought into his life. He realized that in saving her that snowy morning, he had in fact saved himself. "Thank you, Goldie," he whispered, his voice thick with emotion. "For everything." Goldie responded with a gentle lick to his cheek, her tail wagging happily. As they continued their walk home, Jonathan felt a sense of peace and purpose that he had never known before. He knew that whatever challenges lay ahead, with Goldie by his side, he was ready to face them. The story of Jonathan and Goldie was more than just a tale of a man and his dog. It was a testament to the transformative power of love, the importance of compassion, and the incredible journey that can unfold when we open our hearts to unexpected possibilities. As they disappeared into the gathering twilight, their silhouettes merged into one, a perfect symbol of the unbreakable bond between a man and the dog who had changed his world. Imagine walking down the street and hearing a faint, desperate cry for help. You look around and see a dying cat covered in flies struggling to survive. What would you do? Stay tuned for our next heart-wrenching story.